Wann bist du überhaupt hier?
Ich verbreche das so, dass ich in dem Wald drin bin. Ich trag dir die Rotznase noch so lang, bis es leer wird.
You must have heard of the chilling movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose. But did you know it was based on the horrifying true story of Anneliese Michel, a young German woman? Anneliese underwent 67 brutal exorcisms, each lasting up to 4 hours, in a desperate attempt to rid her of what priests believed were demonic possessions. In her final months, she refused food and instead ate spiders, coal, and even licked her own urine. And here's the most chilling part. 2 years after her burial, when her body was exhumed, locals claimed it showed almost no signs of decay. What really happened to Anneliese Michel? Let's uncover the terrifying truth behind this tragic tale. You are watching Horror Hour at 7, and today let's find some bone-chilling facts about the exorcism of Anneliese Michel. Anneliese Michel was born in 1952 in Leibelfing, Germany. She was a bright and devout girl, often seen praying at the local church. But at age 16, her life changed forever. During school one day, she collapsed unexpectedly, shaking uncontrollably. She began experiencing sudden convulsions, her body trembling uncontrollably as fear gripped her soul. Doctors diagnosed her with temporal lobe epilepsy, a condition linked to hallucinations and bizarre behavior. But Anneliese claimed to see dark, menacing figures and hear sinister voices whispering in her ears. Her once radiant smile faded as her nights were plagued by horrific visions of fiery pits and shadowy creatures. The medical diagnosis offered no comfort, and the whispers only grew louder. While the medical explanation seemed clear, strange events around her began to raise questions. She began experiencing sudden convulsions, with fear gripped her soul. As Anneliese grew older, her symptoms intensified. She refused to eat, claiming the food was cursed, and began speaking in voices that weren't her own, deep, guttural, and terrifying. The once devout girl started tearing apart rosaries and shrieking at the sight of crosses. Her parents, desperate and afraid, turned to the church for answers. Priests believed she was under the grip of a dark force, something beyond the realm of medicine. Anneliese, they claimed, was no longer just battling illness, but something far more sinister. One night, as Anneliese lay in bed, she felt an overwhelming pressure on her chest. Unable to scream, she described feeling as though something unseen was holding her down. Her parents dismissed it as a bad dream. But that was just the beginning. Soon, Anneliese began hearing voices, low, guttural whispers that mocked her faith and threatened her soul. The house began to feel darker, colder, and her family realized something far more sinister might be at play. As her condition worsened, Anneliese's parents sought medical help. Doctors prescribed anticonvulsants, but the episodes became more violent. Anneliese began to claim she saw demonic faces in the walls and heard voices commanding her to harm herself. Despite various treatments, nothing worked. Her parents turned to their faith, believing Anneliese's soul was under attack. In desperation, Anneliese's parents approached Father Alt, a local priest. After hearing their story, he suspected demonic possession, but needed approval for an exorcism. The church required undeniable proof. Meanwhile, Anneliese's behavior grew more erratic. She began to avoid religious symbols, screaming violently at crucifixes and holy water. The battle for her soul had begun. The church approved exorcisms, believing Anneliese was a victim of demonic possession. And in September 1975, when she was 23 years old, the first exorcism was performed. Father Alt, joined by Father Renz, began the ritual with prayers in Latin. During the sessions, she spoke in multiple voices, each claiming to be a different entity: Cain, Hitler, Judas, and Lucifer himself. Her body convulsed violently as prayers echoed through the room. The room grew icy cold, and an unexplainable darkness seemed to fill the air. "Leave her," the priests commanded, but the forces seemed to dig deeper into her soul. Each exorcism session left her weaker, her body bruised and emaciated, but her resolve never wavered. Anneliese believed she was fighting to save others, sacrificing herself for their sins. As her condition worsened, Anneliese Michel's eating habits turned alarming. She refused normal food and water, claiming it was tainted or cursed. Instead, she consumed insects, spiders, and even coal, believing it was the only sustenance she could tolerate. Her frail body, already weakened by malnutrition, bore the toll of her terrifying ordeal, and her weight dropped drastically. Her family watched helplessly as her emaciated frame became a haunting reminder of the battle she was fighting. Despite her frail state, Anneliese insisted that the exorcisms continue. She believed her suffering was part of a divine mission. "I must endure this," she told her mother. "It is for the salvation of many." Witnesses reported objects moving on their own in the Michel home. Doors slammed shut, chairs tipped over, and mirrors shattered without explanation. The family began to feel that they too were under attack. The priests continued the exorcisms, determined to save Anneliese's soul despite the mounting dangers. By early 1976, Anneliese had endured over 50 exorcisms. She could barely stand, let alone speak. But during one session, she suddenly rose with inhuman strength, screaming in a voice that wasn't her own. "You cannot save her," the voice growled. "She belongs to us." The priests redoubled their efforts, determined to fight until the end. As the exorcisms continued, the toll on Anneliese became undeniable. Her frail body trembled under the strain of spiritual battles, yet her voice roared with unimaginable strength. During one session, she spoke of horrifying visions, flaming pits, shadowy figures, and endless torment. Her family pleaded with the priests, torn between hope and heartbreak. The priests, unwavering in their faith, believed they were nearing a breakthrough. Those who attended the exorcisms began reporting inexplicable phenomena. Crucifixes seemed to heat up in their hands. The scent of sulfur filled the air, and unearthly growls echoed even when Anneliese was silent. One attendee claimed to see a dark figure looming behind Anneliese during a prayer session. "It wasn't her shadow," he later recounted. "It moved on its own." In one of her last lucid moments, Anneliese turned to her mother with tears streaming down her face. "Mama," she whispered, "I'm free of them." But her body told another story. Weak and emaciated, she could barely lift her hands. Her family prayed this was a sign of victory, but the priests knew the fight wasn't over yet. On a stormy night in June 1976, the final exorcism took place. Lightning cracked outside as Father Alt and Father Renz began the prayers. Anneliese screamed and writhed as if her body was at war. "Leave her alone," Father Alt commanded the unseen forces. Suddenly the room fell silent. Everyone held their breath, wondering if the nightmare had ended, or if it was only beginning. Over 10 months, Anneliese endured 67 grueling exorcisms, each session lasting up to 4 agonizing hours. Her guttural screams echoed through the tapes of the rituals, unearthly and haunting, as holy water was sprinkled and prayers were chanted. By June 1976, Anneliese's body was ravaged. She weighed a mere 68 pounds, her face bruised, her eyes sunken, her teeth fractured. In her final exorcism, she uttered a trembling plea for absolution before whispering to her mother, "Mother, I'm scared." That was her last cry. On June 30th, 1976, at the age of 23, Anneliese Michel succumbed to her ordeal, leaving behind a chilling legacy of faith, fear, and torment. The official cause of death was malnutrition and dehydration, but her parents and the priests believed her soul had been saved. Her mother described her face in death as peaceful, free from the torment that had consumed her life. Yet, her death marked the start of a new battle, the legal consequences of her exorcism. Following her death, Anneliese's parents and the priests were charged with negligent homicide. The trial drew international attention, reigniting debates about faith, medicine, and mental health. During the trial, audio recordings of the exorcisms were played, chilling the courtroom. The prosecution argued that Anneliese needed medical help, not spiritual intervention. But the defense maintained she was fighting forces beyond human understanding.
Nein, wenn ich trag dir die Rotznase noch so lang, bis es lebt wird.
The exorcism tapes became infamous, revealing voices that didn't belong to Anneliese. Low growls, guttural screams, and words in ancient languages echoed through the recordings. Experts analyzed the tapes, some attributing the voices to her condition, while others claimed no human could replicate such sounds. These tapes remain a chilling testament to her ordeal. The case of Anneliese Michel divided public opinion. Skeptics dismissed her story as a tragic case of untreated mental illness. Believers saw her as a martyr who sacrificed herself for the greater good. The debate raged on, with books, documentaries, and movies reigniting interest in her story over the years. Each retelling added to her legend. 2 years after her death, Anneliese's body was exhumed. The rumors of her incorrupt corpse drew crowds, but the church denied any supernatural significance. Meanwhile, her grave became a pilgrimage site, visited by those who believed in her sanctity. The question remains, was Anneliese Michel a victim of possession or a tragic figure lost to the gaps between faith and science? Anneliese's story inspired countless works, most famously the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Her case has been studied in classrooms, debated in churches, and dissected by psychologists. To this day, her life and death remain a powerful reminder of the mysteries of the human mind and soul. She has become a symbol of both faith and tragedy. As we look back on Anneliese Michel's life, one thing is certain. Her story is as haunting as it is heartbreaking. Whether she was possessed or ill, her bravery in the face of unimaginable torment has left an indelible mark on the world. Perhaps the true horror lies not in what happened to Anneliese, but in the unanswered questions that remain. Her story is a chilling reminder that some mysteries may never be solved. Do you believe Anneliese Michel's torment was a result of possession, or was it a tragic medical condition? Share your thoughts in comments.